So Mega Man X was a good game and people liked it. Didn't take long for Capcom to beget a sequel, and so we have Mega Man X2 for the Super Nintendo, released in 1995. The cart these days is a bit pricey, and even back in the day, the only time I'd ever get to play this one was whenever it was available to rent at the video store. I'd tell the kids to ask their parents, but no kid is watching this, so Google it, you ass. Mega Man X2 follows the same format as the previous game, opening up with an intro level that throws you right into the action with a high-speed sequence where you crash your bike into a Maverick and then you mash that fire button to shoot things. Among your basic abilities of running, jumping, shooting, wall climbing, I don't think I mentioned that one last time, and charging your shots, you now have a dash that was an upgrade in the previous game, but is now a default thing, and good thing too, because this intro level does not waste time in giving you a sampler of what to expect going forward. Crushing walls, big easy robot boss to kill. Booyah, or whatever the cool kids call it. The dash, otherwise known as the emergency acceleration system, that rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? Is the only thing that survives the passage of time from the previous game, as X is back to basics. No armor, paltry life meter. Never really questioned this because, fine, whatever. New game, clean slate. Who knows what happens last time depending on the player. Maybe you didn't go for those extra parts or whatever the case may be. But now I'm like, why? Why don't you have the armor anymore? Maybe it broke or something. I blame that Johnny fellow for putting the question into my mind, cause... Once that's cleared and you watch the following cutscene that takes place in one of the stages you'll be visiting, once or twice, it's the standard Mega Man formula. 8 Maverick stages to choose from, blast, dash, jump, and run your way through to the end, defeat the Maverick in question, gain its weapons, and who knows, maybe you'll divert from the established course, and find enhancement bits like life-extending heart containers, sub-tanks for reserve energy, and capsules that will grant you pieces to your newest armor. Said armor upgrades include body armor that reduces and absorbs damage to charge a screen-nuking Giga attack, a buster upgrade allowing you to charge weapons and fire 2 charge shots, a scanning bit that lets you scan for secret passages, and since X already has a dash ability from the start, the boot upgrade will allow him to dash in the air, which is pretty amazing. So yeah, once again, 3 out of 4, with the head upgrade being another disappointment. I do like the double shot, one on release and the other held in reserve, or you just shoot them both for maximum damage. Fun fact, a lesser version of this attack appears in Mega Man 11. In the future. Or is it the past? Well. So I may have mentioned in the X review that after the first game, the difficulty starts falling off a cliff somewhat. And in the case of X2, it's because of stuff like this. Mega Man X2 throws a monkey wrench into the formula after defeating 2 Mavericks and introduces the X-Hunters into the fray. These are optional boss encounters that will appear in random levels, and you'll have to fight them in these alternate boss rooms that you'll have to find yourself. Some of them are pretty easy to find. These are fairly challenging encounters, but defeating them will net you Zero's parts. Because you see, these X-Hunters want to revive Zero, who met his unfortunate demise in the previous game. Sorry if I spoiled anything for anybody. These games are decades old, nobody's playing them anymore. Okay. Failing to get Zero's parts merely means an extra boss battle towards the end of the game, while getting them all doesn't. So, if you want a little extra work, or you want a full completion thing, or maybe that Shoryuken thing towards the end of the game, go for it, but it doesn't affect the ending, merely the progression. The problem with these encounters is that they appear at random points and they keep moving to different levels in between sessions. Not only that, but they only spawn on levels occupied by an active Maverick boss. So as you clear stages, your opportunities to recover Zero's missing pieces become smaller. And if even one of those X-Hunters survive the initial wave, because you'll face them later on in the later levels anyway, all that work is for naught and you'll have to deal with Zero in that one extra boss fight. So, if you're doing the rock, paper, scissors thing and the next stage in that order doesn't include an X-Hunter, then you'll have to break the sequence to pursue said hunter elsewhere if you want to get everything, and this annoys me greatly. Look, it's a nice idea to give people an extra thing to do beyond the normal mega routine, and it's not something you have to do so long as you're willing to fight your pal at the end. I'm just not a fan of the execution. But some folks might be, and that's perfectly fine. You take that out of the equation, however, and Mega Man X2 doesn't stray too far from the tree in terms of gameplay. The overall difficulty I find a little higher here. Probably because now that we've gotten past the hump and we made the dash a standard move, there's more of an emphasis on high-speed antics and wall-jumping acrobatics in some of these levels to the degree that some of these segments, such as the Rising Lava and Flame Stag stage or Navigating Rain and Wire Sponge, will test your skill in using these abilities. And the levels in general tend to be a bit more creative, I think. Riding a speed bike through the desert, ride armor in the belly of the tank, this scanner gimmick tracking you down to gain some information that will make this sub-boss tougher. Some decent ideas here, without being too gimmicky. Fortunately, X2 retains the slick responsive control from the previous game. Everything works without a hitch for the most part. The air dash takes a little while to get used to, but for the most part it's relatively easy to learn how things work, and you could change the button mapping if desired. I didn't mention this the last time because the default setup is just fine as is, and I rarely touch the options screen, about as much as I touch the weapons in X2. Yeah, second game in and the master weapons already feel a bit underwhelming. A lot of them seem useful for only certain situations. Using the wheel to dig through certain areas, or the crystal thing to crystallize certain foes and use them as temporary platforms to reach higher ground. And the charge version of the crystal thing slows down the game, because that's what we need in X2 is more slowdown. We'll get to that later. And speaking of charged up weapons, when charged up, the speed burner acts as an offensive dash that can also be done in the air, giving X a limited form of double air dash if done correctly. The rest of the weapons I only use for weaknesses against bosses, and even then, it could be worse, I suppose. Mega Man X2 looks like Mega Man X. I don't know what you were expecting in this second game that's part of a franchise called Mega Man, a franchise with a series of 8-bit games that shared the same graphical style since the dawn of time, but there you go. A sequel that retains the visual stylings of its predecessor and does a fine job of it with the various settings and character designs, the reactions and whatnots. The stages have some nice scenery to it for the most part, and I like that one of the Maverick stages doubles as the final level. That's fine, I suppose. Mega Man X2 featured an enhancement chip called CX4, which allowed for some primitive wireframe effects to be displayed on screen, whether as part of a cutscene or as enemies for you to battle. And I'll tell you what, as a younger fellow back in the day, seeing this wireframe sword move about with slick and smooth motion blew my mind. It's not like the Star Fox polygons that run at a crap frame rate. This was slick and I loved it. Nowadays, I merely like it, because I just remembered how much Neo Sigma chugged and everything slowed to a crawl. Yeah, slowdown is a real thing here, kids. And sometimes you really feel it. Which is why having a charged weapon slow down time even further is really, really smart. But the rest of the game, though, rest of the time, fantastic. Great looking game. The wireframe stuff really makes it unique and stuff, and they used it again for the sequel, so that's fine. That's fantastic. In terms of sound, the soundtrack's good for the most part, though it doesn't quite reach the quality of X1. Part of that, I think, has to do with the change in instruments. The guitar-esque notes sound a bit harsher and rougher than in the previous game. Not necessarily a bad thing, because there's still some good quality tunes here. Overdrive Ostrich for one, Morph Moth for another. The second X-Hunter theme has a good rhythm to it despite looping after half a minute. Bubble Crap's theme is apparently so good it gets reused in a later game. But then you have shit like Wheel Gator, which... Holy fuck, what the fuck is this noise? Sound effects are on par with the last game, but also seem rougher and less impactful. The explosions I find sound a bit weaker here, but that's just me. Overall, Mega Man X2 is a perfectly fine sequel to Mega Man X, with some nice additions to the package that is marred by a couple quibbles that detract from the experience, but still a reasonably worthy follow-up to the previous entry. There's some neat bits here and there's some more lore added for those who care for such things, some cool air dashing and some more set pieces, but it's not like some great masterpiece or anything like that. It's merely a very good game with some minor quibbles that doesn't otherwise detract from the experience all that much, but keeps it from reaching that same level at its predecessor. Still worth checking out if you somehow haven't done so already, and the recent Legacy Collection gives you a much cheaper means of playing this perfectly fine sequel to a timeless classic.